evening, everybody. Oh goodness, I was trying to prepare for this presentation, and I know I would be standing up here going, how do I start this? Because I know some of y'all, know a lot of y'all who have kept up with my time before I graduated from NC State and have been eagerly awaiting to hear what I did next. So again, my name is Amanda Wilkins. I'm the garden curator at Juniper Level Botanic Garden down in South Raleigh, way South Raleigh. Is the botanic garden which Plant Delights is associated with. But before that, I graduated from NC State. In December 2013 with my degree in horticultural science. From there, I have jumped all over the place. But before I go over that, we are going to be mainly focusing on my time in Scotland. I did my master's in the biodiversity and taxonomy of plants at the University of Edinburgh, the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh. And to get us started, we're going to look at a lot of the native plants of Scotland, of which there aren't many. There's about 900 native plants that are also found elsewhere in Europe. But we're also going to look at a lot of rhododendron porn tonight, y'all. Lots of beautiful pictures of rhododendrons, just giving you a bit of a teaser there. So I started here in Raleigh in December 2013, and in April 2014, I left, missing most of my lovely compadres here at the JCRA, and I went to the Polyhill Arboretum on that little island off the coast of Cape Cod, Massachusetts, to be their curatorial intern. The Polyhill Arboretum has the National Collection of Stewartia, and this is one of our native Stewartia, Malacodendron. And gosh, that is true to color. I did not use any editing photos or any editing software to get that color. And Miss Polly had been developing this 70-acre property on Martha's Vineyard for a little over 50 years by the time I got there. And so we had this Cornus Cusa Alley that we kept up, and it was just amazing. And one of the hallmarks of Miss Polly's prowess was she grew everything from seed. That was how she knew that it would survive, and she grew everything from seed in this little outdoor nursery. And if it survived on Martha's Vineyard when she was away 7 months of the year in Delaware, it went in her arboretum. One of my favorite plants is in this picture, though. This is the Julian Hill Magnolia macrophylla, which, if you read any books about Magnolia macrophylla, it says it should not really be a good landscape tree, but it was really one of the finest. This is one of the many flowers on that tree. I love it. Easily one of my favorites. It is the largest flowered and largest leaved native plant in North America. And this is Tessa. And Tessa and Eva were the summer interns. I have to really make a jab for interns. Internship programs at our botanical gardens are really important. And through the summer, it was amazing to watch them learn about horticulture. They were both sophomores in university. And this is also where I learned my love of broadleaf evergreen rhododendrons. Miss Polly had an amazing collection, and Tom was really working on trying to get it certified. But man, when you see trees this big in full flower and these incredible colors, you lose your mind a little bit. But all of this was in thanks to the curator, Tom Clark. I am standing here before you in this position with this brain on my shoulders because of this man. And he really taught me everything I know about curation. He helped me build my bookshelves to be a better garden curator, so I have to thank him. But besides working at the Arboretum, I highly recommend going to Martha's Vineyard. It's a 100-square-mile triangular-shaped island off the coast of Cape Cod, and about 33% of it is permanently conserved, has hundreds of miles of walking trails, really incredible plants. I love traveling because I get to see plants I know that don't look like what they should. So this is Eva doing the beetlebum dance. These are beetlebum trees right here, or better known as Nyssa sylvatica, or black gum. And on the coast, you have these great glacial till beaches on the north side of the island. And I had never seen that. I grew up in North Carolina. I grew up going to the beaches in Myrtle Beach, and rocks on a beach just blew my mind. Every single one of them was different, and I brought back about 4 boxes of them in my car. I've got to figure out what to do with them, though, because they're all on my porch now, and they're all very beautiful and very heavy. But we survived. It was a great summer, and we learned a lot from each other. But I knew that after that experience, I had a lot more to learn. I had my undergrad degree in horticulture. I learned a lot from Tom, but I'm like, I really need to get into the nitty-gritty of what this is. And I wanted to do that before it snowed. So the day before I left Martha's Vineyard, it snowed, and I was like, okay, I'm getting off this rock. Not really. This was on Thanksgiving Day. I went on an epic 2-week trip back down the East Coast in North Carolina. But when I got back, I had to find a place to live. I had graduated, and so my grandparents down in Mobile, Alabama, right there, offered to let me stay with them, and I became the curator of collections at the Mobile Botanical Gardens. Please go. It's 100 acres of incredible beauty. Mobile is very hot, but it's well worth sweating a lot. And the day I started as the curator, I got accepted into the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh in their master's program. So I said, thank you for the job, but I will be gone in 8 months. But I hope I can do some good work for you guys while I'm here. So I was there for about 1.5 years, and I came back, and they gave me my job back. So I did that. And I was there for about 1.5 years. And then I decided, okay, I really need to come back to North Carolina. I'm missing my North Carolina roots. And I was very lucky to get the position at Juniper Level as the garden curator, of which I wear. Okay, so I am wearing a tartan. This is the University of Edinburgh's tartan. I'm sure if anybody is of any Scottish, if anybody comes from a Scottish clan or family, you have a tartan and you're very proud of your tartan. Unfortunately, I'm here to tell you that tartans really don't mean anything. It was very much like the pattern on your shirt. It was more, sometimes it was a sign of, it was a status symbol, sometimes it was camouflage, sometimes it was just, you know, I really like green and red next to each other, or for some reason there's like a black and yellow one. It looks very strange. But it was really up to the clans to decide their colors, and they really don't have any meaning behind them. There's no universal system for what they mean, like heraldry. So you can ascribe whatever meaning you want to them. The shawl I'm wearing here, I just got off the Royal Mile, and it just matches my buttons that I bought in a really nice store on the Mile. So this is the United Kingdom, and for those of y'all who do, the Edinburgh is about right here. This is also an accurate to scale map. The Hadrian's Wall is about there-ish, and this is Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland. Those are 2 different things, please remember that. I didn't know that before going. And this is where we will be going throughout this lovely trip. You will notice I didn't go any further north than this. It is because I spent a lot of time on this island, because my clan is from that little dot right there. So when I got off the plane in Edinburgh, and I came onto Princes Street, and this is what I saw out of the top of the bus, and I went, oh yeah, I'm in the right spot. I knew I was in the right spot. So this is downtown Edinburgh, looking towards the old town, and behind me is the new town. And Edinburgh is one of those cities that is divided in 2. It's divided in 2 by Princes Street Gardens. And walking around, I realized everybody wants to shove some kind of plant in every nook and cranny. This is off the street, and almost every single street had some kind of potted plant on it. And it was lovely. I was like, okay, these are my people. It can be dark and dreary, and they're going to have cyclamen and petunias in the summer, or cyclamen in the winter-ish. They have very strange seasons. So I was wandering around and trying to get a sense. I came about 2 weeks early, so I would not be doing homework and trying to figure out where to buy groceries at the same time. Because I didn't know if I could think about that in a different country at the same time. And so I walked over Princes Street Gardens past Waverley Station and came onto the Royal Mile. Now this is the crossroads between the Royal Mile and the Mound. The Mound is just the big hill that the castle sits on. You will realize if anybody has not been to Scotland and does go to Edinburgh, if you look at a map of Edinburgh, it is a 3D city. And there are roads on top of roads, so if you look at a map, you're like, why are there 3 roads on top of each other? It's because there are. So just stop somebody, they're generally very nice. But I was surrounded by all this old stuff. My grandmother inspired me growing up to have this love of history and sense of place, and had imbibed me with this love of Scotland. I came here going, oh my goodness, look at all of this, these beautiful buildings. And when I had applied to the university, I made sure I wanted to live at the university's properties, partly because the university is a very old institution. Edinburgh's a very old place, and I'd never been to another country, and so I figured, well, if there's housing that's guaranteed for students, I should probably take that. And I wanted to live in the oldest student dorms they had, of course, because I like old stuff. And so I was going to live in Milnes Court, which is this little place right here. I'm walking up to find out where it is, and I go, oh, that's an old building, this is exciting. And you walk up in this alleyway and you come to this, and there's Milnes Court there. You go, oh, that looks a bit scary. It is a bit scary, but it was pretty cool. I walked up and I came out, and you open into this courtyard. And when I showed up to get my room assignment, I showed up into this little courtyard and I said, here I am, where's my room assignment? They said, oh, you're living in Patrick Getty's hall. And I'm like, oh, where is that? They're like around the corner. I'm like, oh, where's around the corner? You gotta take a right, take a right, take a right. And when you take a right and you take a right, take a right, and you end up here, and you come around here, and there's the white door. So I'm like, I walk down this little alleyway that's at a 70 million degree angle, and I go, whoa. And I get in the white door and find my room, very modest, humble room. But that's my view, y'all. And I go, you gotta be kidding me. The Japanese maple was just about to start coloring up. There's an Acer Griseum over here. There's a Harry Lauder's walking stick in Scotland right there. And the anemones are in full flower. Really incredible view. So I bring my plants in, because of course I'd been there for 2 weeks and I couldn't live in a flat without a plant. And the cute little Sainsbury's just had like these 5-pound orchids. And I came out into the kitchen and I met my roommate Yue from China. Throughout our year there, she was fascinated with the food I would make. And she would come into the kitchen whenever she smelled something with a spoon at the ready. Can I try this? Of course. She really liked tacos. But that was the view out of my kitchen window, y'all. Princess Street Gardens here, Newtown here, Firth the Forth just right there, and the Kingdom of Fife. It is officially the Kingdom of Fife. It's still a kingdom. So it's pretty cool to wake up and have that every morning, except for when they installed the Christmas tree. Christmas is an institution. There's a major Christmas market that takes over the entirety of this location. And it's very bright at night. It was kind of nice to have a free Christmas tree too. And then sometimes the view wasn't even there. There were a couple days where you wake and go, oh, where am I? This is occasionally, sometimes you might hear me use a word dreich for those of y'all who interact with me. This is dreich. Dreary, cold, wet, and just generally not nice to go out in. But not too bad. Not too bad at all. These were my next door neighbors. So if you took a left out of the courtyard, you came to the Esplanade and Edinburgh Castle. And if you looked out behind where I was standing, you get a nice view of Arthur Seton George Heriot School, which is this old building here. 12th century, it's now a boarding school. And the Pentlands to your right. It is a really well-situated city. It's very picturesque. And very romantic. I did partake of the cultural fair. This is a haggis I bought. I have a gluten allergy, so I made sure it was a gluten-free haggis. Organic, it's good. And you've got your grey squirrels, which are an invasive species in the UK. I did not get one of those. And streaky bacon. Streaky bacon is just American bacon, because what they call bacon, we call Canadian bacon. It was all very confusing, and we got in a lot of arguments with the UK folks in my program over which one was more valid than the other. I also partook of the liquid cultural fair. I always grew up drinking whiskey with my family, but when you have access to malt of the month, which changes every week, so you get to try a couple of malts every month, it's pretty cool. And Sandy Bell's was my local pub, because they had food for the soul. I'm a huge fan of bluegrass music, and there they just call folk music, so it's pretty cool. And this is a very walking city. I really love these long sidewalks and these towering trees. And they always have these horticultural surprises. This is the meadows in January, February, which you would not think anything is going to live in Scotland. But the crocuses bloom at the same time there as they do here. And this is the colours of the University of Edinburgh. So Princess Street Gardens is the heart of Edinburgh, and it's a well-situated garden because it hides all of Waverley Station. You never know that you're walking by or you don't even hear the train station. And it's full, there are no repetitions of trees there. And it goes from a well-manicured garden into this beautiful countryside grassland, but you always have these wonderful vistas of the city, whichever side of the garden you're on. And it's a nice way for people who cannot get into the Highlands and into these faraway places to get a sense of the local flora of Scotland. And also azaleas. Okay, so these are, during the summer I was walking through on the weekend, and all of a sudden I come along to this bank of azaleas. And a little bit of backstory. So not only did I develop a love of rhododendrons when I was at Polly Hill, while I was down in Mobile, I got to know a local nurseryman named Martin van der Giesen, and he was a huge champion of Dr. Eugene Aromey, who was developing these heat-tolerant versions of these Exbury hybrid deciduous azaleas. These are the Exburys. And I came upon them and went, whoa, this is what they were talking about. No wonder Dr. Aromey was trying to bring these to the Southeast United States. And I proceeded for the next 20 minutes to go, oh my God, look at that one. Oh my God, look at that one. I think I took about 50 pictures that pretty much came back looking the same. But when you see this, you just have these layers and layers of colors, you easily lose your mind. And for being a city-run garden, or in the middle of this city, people are very respectful. And this is actually a rock garden that they put in this access road. And they do very little to it. This is, it changes from season to season. And all these plants just come and go as they please and changes. It's a living tapestry on this hillside. And of course, the floral clock. To see them put this in is pretty cool. They've got this really cool ladder that they made. So Edinburgh is the city of 7 hills, and this is one or two, I don't know how this counts, but this is Arthur's Seat and the Salisbury Crag here. And what I came to know is Scotland, it broke off from North America. Actually, a lot of the Highlands are the tail end of the Appalachians. And a lot of the country is also volcanic. So this is an old volcano. And they must have gone through a hot spot at some point, because if I'd taken a picture going a little bit further to the left off the screen, you would have seen these lines, these like very, this line of pointed hills. And it's just these little volcanic, what they call laws. But this was the biggest one. It was a huge explosion. But now it's just this place where a lot of people go for a walk and see a better view of the city. And it's covered in these grasslands. Just a couple of trees here and there. It is managed. They do occasionally burn it. They do occasionally mow it, and occasionally they will also bring in sheep. But they do it in a very controlled manner. And then down here, you get a sense of get these bogs down here. But on the hillside, when I first got there, I was so lucky that the heather was in bloom the first weekend that I was there. And so I was climbing Arthur's Seat, just surrounded by these tussocks of heather, and come to find out, heather is not just one species. It's a whole menagerie of species of Erica, of things in the Erica family, but also, or in the genus, but also Collina vulgaris. And then of course the honeybees were the bumblebees were very happy to have it. But the diversity just within these very small areas was pretty cool. I would say that this picture is only about, a tussock about that big. And then the gorse. Do not go into the gorse, but the smell of the gorse is wonderful. It smells just like coconut oil. And it burns really well. Sometimes they have occasional problems with fires. But you get to the top of Arthur's Seat, and this is what you get. People with selfie sticks, and occasionally people do fall off the mountain. But it really is an incredible view. I saw people climbing up that mountain with heels this big. I don't think they realized how tall and long the walk was, but really an incredible view. There's Edinburgh Castle for scale. Okay, so I have not even started talking about my university time because I was there for 2 weeks early. I made sure to get some travel in. And so this is Oban in the west of Scotland. There is a ferry terminal. And the great thing about Scotland is it's really tiny. So all of the public transport schedules line up with each other. So I could get on a train from Edinburgh, get into Glasgow, from Glasgow go to Oban, get on a ferry, get on a bus in Craigmere, from Craigmere I could go to Finnefort, from Finnefort I could go to Iona. And if any of those things were late in between, they would phone the one down the way and they would hold the bus for you. It was great. I only had to do that once. But the best fish and chips is in Oban. It's down that road there. It's the Oban Fish and Chip Shop. And anyway, so I got on the ferry because I wanted to go to the Isle of Mull. So what I didn't tell you is when I was 13, my grandmother used her inheritance money to take me and my 9-year-old cousin to Scotland to get in touch with our cultural heritage. And as part of the tour that she had signed us up for, we went to the Duart Castle, which is where the Clan MacLean their seat is, and my mom's side of the family is Clan MacLean. So their castle is right there. So when I came back to Scotland on the second time, I was like, of course, I have to go see the family castle, which was in the in the throes of being repaired. This was built in the 1400s, but they were trying to restore it so that the clan leader could live in it, because it was not built as a place to be lived in, it was built as a fortress. But I do remember when I came that this Rowan tree was in the courtyard, and Rowan is a very magical tree to the ancient Scottish peoples, the Celtic people, and this was planted when the Clan MacLean came back to the castle, because it had been abandoned for about 300 years. And of course you got to have your thistle in the castle, very castle-like. So from the top of the castle you get to see these kind of wet, boggy moors on the coastline, and then you get to see, I practiced this last night, Dún de Gúile, that's what this one's called. If any of y'all have tried to speak Gaelic, it comes up about that the same that way. But I remember as a child, I'm like, okay, I'm going to climb that mountain one day. I got to climb that mountain one day. But of course, I had to go see the plants first. And just like the bogs in North America, they are so biodiverse. You look and you're like, oh, it's just grass. And it's like, no, it's grass. It's moss. It's ferns. It's rushes, and then all these small wildflowers kind of tucked in, and heathers, and then these really weird club mosses. And you really got to take a closer look at the rocks. I counted in here, there are about 25 species of plants that I could kind of tease out just with my eye. Very tiny flowers, but really makes a beautiful tapestry. And this is what makes up the Scottish flora. And a nice view back towards the Highlands. Now this was a woodland that was planted right outside of the castle grounds. A little bit before I had gone when I was younger, as part of the Millennium Project. So in 2000, the Scottish government gave out grants to landowners to plant small parts of their property with native species of trees, and a kind of like a build it and they will come kind of concept. They gave the landowners the trees, they gave them the funding to support it, and they just said, please plant these trees and keep the wild animals out. And so this was 2015. This is 15 years after being planted from that kind of wasted grassland type area. And this is an endangered ecosystem type. It's a mix of birch and oak and hazels. And most of this was cut down during the Industrial Revolution in England. So this is kind of what a lot of west coast of Scotland would have looked like if we hadn't needed all the coal to support the cities. Very fairy woodland looking. So instead of taking the bus back from the castle, because it was about a 3.5-mile walk back to the ferry, I decided to walk the country road, because that's what you do when you're in Scotland, right? And it was just like you would imagine a country road being in the middle of nowhere, Scotland. These tall bracken ferns, up to your hips, and grasses and moss-covered rocks, and these trees covered in lichens and fungi, and you find these big groups of different kinds of old and new mosses, and you're like, okay, no wonder they were making up fairy tales. It really does look like a fairy tale land. And while I was there, also, I tried my first attempt at climbing this mountain. It was a bit foolhardy errand. But this gives you a sense of what is happening in modern Scotland now. You see kind of these skeletal remains of forestry projects. They're growing mainly Sitka spruce, which is of course from the west coast of North America. You found a lot of trees and plants from the west coast of North America grow really well in Scotland. And they're great forestry. But what they do is it's just cut the timber, knock it down, haul it off, and leave it. It's a lot different than our forestry. But if you pass through this, I passed by it, very, very dense woods, very dark, and climbed into these waterfalled areas, and birches and bracken ferns. And Tony, that's the sphagnum moss. That's the color of the sphagnum moss. That's kind of why I wasn't surprised that one time, but all sorts of different colors. And look how clear the water is. I was sitting there having my lunch, and all of a sudden a government employee comes out of nowhere and says, oh, I'm testing the water. I'm like, what? But you look at a lot of pictures of Scotland, you see these kind of rolling, open, no forested areas, and this is what it would have looked like before all of that, and really reminds you of Eastern North America. It's a lot wetter. But of course this is Scottish weather, and so the rain came, and I was like, I'll just keep climbing, and you don't see anything, and then suddenly the sound comes back, and the clouds move very quickly. But I was climbing, and I reached this bog, and I'm sinking ankle deep into gosh knows what. And I'm like, I'll just keep going. And I kept getting this view, and I'm like, surely I'm almost there. And I look up, and I'm nowhere near there. But I'm like, the gate is open, so I can go, right? And I go through the gate, and I sink a bit deeper into the soil, and I'm finding all of these JCRA, a butterwort. This is a carnivorous plant all over the place. And it's really amazing. I'm taking pictures and I'm going to send it to my friend and go, ha ha ha, look at this, these plants. But I did not make it to the top. I did have to come back to school. This is the old college at the University of Edinburgh. I went in this building about 3 times. Most of my classes were based at the Botanic, so the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh. And every day I went into the science building and was surrounded by these incredible minds who were doing some cutting-edge research and cutting-edge botany in these far-flung places in the world. And I learned how to classify my trail mix. That was really what my master's was about. One day in a delirium of study, I was like, ooh, look, it's Moraceae and Fabaceae, and wasn't quite sure what that was. So it was either a grape or a prune. So Rosaceae or Vitaceae, and of course our pecan, which is really nice. And I was like, oh, our tropical cousins, the Anacardiaceae, and the Malvaceae, or Sterculiaceae, more Sterculiaceae kind of person, which is fun to say. And Ericaceae, not to be confused with Ericaceae, or Palmae, depending on which century you live in, or the really weird one, Lexidaceae. It had been a long day, y'all. But we had these incredible tools at our fingertips. There were 19 people in my program from, I think, 8 or 9 countries. And we spent an entire year and a couple months just going through this very rigorous program. We spent a lot of time diagramming flowers because our professor had literally written the book on floral diagrams. So we did a lot of that, and it just essentially spent a lot of time with a microscope going, oh, how am I going to draw that line, and what world does that go in? And you learn to get really good at identifying parts, or at least thinking abstractly about what is a flower, what is a petal. These are the questions that we were posed with. We were also occasionally gassed with the smell of the flowers that we were dissecting. If anybody has ever stuck their nose near an Aristolochia or a Dutchman's pipe, don't. That's it. Or you get these kind of weirdo guys, things in the Zingiberaceae and the ginger family. They've got these weird asymmetric flowers, and you've got to figure out what's what and where the rest of it went. And you look at it under microscopes, like, oh look, I do believe that's a nectary, and there's some pollen. But we didn't just look at plants. We looked at other plants because we also had to ask ourselves, what is a plant? We did study fungi and algae, and red algae and brown algae and green algae and blue algae, and we had to be able to tell the difference between the four. Please don't ask me; it's scary. We also had access to these rare book collections, and this is a hand painted orchid drawing, and there is the botanical description there, and also there are some lovely folks. And we spent, well, I lied. We spent about a week at the University of Edinburgh in a basement lab with a room full of Tobagia violacea, or society garlic, if anybody knows that one. It is a perennial native to South Africa, and we were tasked with how to discern what a species is based on squashing the ends of the roots under a microscope and counting the chromosomes. It was a week-long process. And if anybody has stuck their face into a clump of society garlic, it's like sticking your face into a clove of garlic and not having anything else to smell. So we got really close with each other and developed headaches by the end of the day. But what we really loved were these plant walks with our professor, Dr. Louis Rontz-de-Crane. And we spent a lot of time with him picking plants apart and looking at the bits, and him explaining, how to interpret the different parts and what they mean in terms of floral evolution, pollinator evolution, as well as how things are related to each other. But also, so when I went, I'd had a lot of experience in horticulture at botanical gardens and with plants, and but for a lot of these people, this was the first time that they were seeing a lot of these plants. It was the first time they were ever challenged with these questions. And so as somebody who loves to teach and loves to learn, it was really fun to watch them kind of be inspired by these incredible stories of these plants. Even the quietest person in our group was surprised at how big these Viria rhododendrons were. This is another rhododendron. And if anybody is taking notes, that is a great place to look at some tropical epiphytic rhododendrons. We also talked a lot about biogeography and conservation. And this is a conifer, an extremely endangered conifer called Fitzroya cupressoides. It is native to Chile. And the Royal Botanic Garden has a connection to Chile. There's been a lot of, they do support the Chilean government, and they do a lot of botanical work and conservation work. But we were looking at the cones. These are the cones of this conifer, and they look surprisingly like flowers. And so where does this fit in the story of evolution? But not only were we learning about conservation in far-flung places, we were also learning about conservation in Scotland, which has a lot to do with ferns and mosses and grasses, and not a lot of pretty things that we in Eastern North America like to look at. But we got to talk a lot about cryptic species and what is a species and what is diversity, how do we define that? And this lovely lady is about this tall and this big and has a brilliant Scottish accent. So she was lovely to follow around with. We also learned about the ancient flora. So remember I said that Sir Arthur's Seat was a volcano 300 million years ago. So we went, we had a paleobotanist come from Kew, and we went to look at the ancient coastal lands of Scotland. These are ancient waves, about 300 to 400 million years old. And Dr. Bateman spent an afternoon chipping off pieces of 300 million years, and these are pieces of goodness knows what plant. But it was really fascinating to we were walking on these coastlines and just walking over these ancient plants. But not only did we have all these resources provided by the garden, we had the resources of each other. So in this picture, there are 7 different countries represented. And these are all my, some of my classmates. And the irony of this picture just never escaped me, that this is a Scottish dance called a ceilidh, that we were having to raise money for funding projects in Nepal. It's a very, world-oriented place. We were having a good time. And we shared a lot of our cultures with each other. So Adi was from Indonesia, and his name, we called him Adi, but he didn't have a first name. He just picked Adi. We had a couple of gentlemen from Spain, a lot of Americans this year, 2 people from Chile, somebody from Greece. And so I'm like, what do we do in America? We have Thanksgiving dinner. So this is our Thanksgiving, and the British people went, well, that's what we make for Christmas dinner. And went, just make it, it's fine. And then all the folks from other countries were like, you're just going to eat. And it's like, yes. And they went right for it. We all know the universal thing is food, right? But it was fascinating to see how people interpreted that. It was fascinating also to see how hard it was for people to get that concept. But I did do a project while I was there, and I spent a lot of time wandering around the botanics, measuring trees, and looking at rhododendrons in the summertime. And there are several thousand different rhododendrons at the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh. And not only do they have beautiful flowers, they have beautiful leaves and hairs on the leaves called indumentum. And as you're walking around, you're just looking at this incredible diversity because none of them are the same. And a lot of them were brought back when folks from Britain were going into these Asian countries, or into the mountains in the Himalayas, and seeing all this diversity, and they just kept bringing it back, and of course it loves it there. But the more classic area, we've got the palm house here, and this is the alpine house, and the alpine greenhouse, and then this is the rock garden. No, this one here is for Tony. But I'd never learned about rock gardens when I was down here, and then I saw this spring flower show, and I went, whoa, what is that? Because without flowers, they're just these cute little green mounds. I'd never seen anything like that. So seeing the alpine garden in the summertime is, you start to realize why the North American Rock Garden Society is always going on about, you need to have a rock garden, which you guys should all be members, right? So inside the palm house, this is one of the original buildings, and it's the classic palm house. You've got these 100-foot palms. They keep it a balmy 60 degrees in the winter time, and hotter in this, about 60 degrees in the summertime too. But very classic style of things planted in beds, and to manage them, I got to know the horticulturists there, and they really hated it. It was really a pain to deal with. And this roving display of, occasionally it was orchids, occasionally it was gingers. It just depended on what was looking good in the greenhouse at the time. I really liked this orchid display. But occasionally they had their, tomatoes and chili peppers one week. And I was like, oh, you'll have to grow those in pots. Like, oh, yeah, they don't really do all that well outside. And I was looking closer at this one and I went, oh, interesting, chili willy. But I spent a lot of time in the greenhouses just because the diversity, of course, is amazing. And clay is a goofball. But one of my gateways into getting involved in the horticulture side was with the Arid Lands horticulturist. He was the ambassador for the garden, and if you intern at RBGE, you're working in the arid lands. It's also where I learned that agave's sap can sometimes be poisonous. We were hacking at a 12-foot wide agave and it bit back. But also met some very strange things. This is in the citrus family. And you can see the little dots here, oil glands. So I was always in there trading knowledge with the horticulturist, like, oh, look at this. He's like, what are you looking at? I'm like, oh, that. And then he would tell me something. But you've got these classic British perennial borders. We've got our toboggan in the corner. And they had really liked the way that they had planted their expiry hybrids, just because you could stand there and go, oh my gosh, look at all these expiry hybrids. The smell is amazing. On the Gulf Coast, they call these honeysuckle azaleas because they do smell like honeysuckles. And when you see that, it's just stunning. But as things change, stuff is always changing. And they had this lovely little meadow planted with poppies. Another one of the things, if you ever go to the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh, this was the original gardener's house that had been at the first location. They had just finished the renovations of this. They physically moved the building. They moved the whole building from the old location to the location, rebuilt it, and have built the classic teaching garden around it. And on any given, whenever they have events, you really start to get a sense of how much they love gardening. These are for my North American rock garden folks as well. This is the rock garden at the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh. And there were plant families and genera. I had no idea what they were. This is a scree garden that they had planted as part of that as well. This is also one of the oldest trees on the property planted at the top of the rock garden. So it just gives you a sense this rock garden is more than 100 years old. And the garden is these wandering, meandering paths, these incredibly manicured places, and these old trees. This is an Acer Seboldii. It looks a lot like an Acer palmatum or your Japanese maple, but this is an 80-year-old tree just hanging out. Hostas. I was really excited to see hostas, and I love the combo that they came up with here. The horticulturists at RBG have these great eyes for color. Lots of hostas, but they do have slug problem, snail problem. I also got to meet primulas. They had some pretty incredible primula shows, as well as the blue poppies. You lose your mind over some blue poppies. Even the people, like the director of education, the director of science, I'd be out in the garden, and they'd be going, oh, did you see the blue poppies over there? Yeah, I did. Which was great to have. And then the cardiocrine, they call them cardiocrine because your heart skips a beat when you see them. But yeah, when they're in flower, this is 15, sometimes 20 feet tall. I did see some 20-foot tall ones farther north. I don't know if we can try those, Tony, maybe. Brought back some seeds, we could try. But a couple of other interesting trees I found. Halesea caroliniana, which is a native plant to eastern North America, is very happy there. It was also a nice reminder of home. It's also a great gateway place for people who may not be interested in horticulture. My friend actually stopped over on her way back from Jordan to walk the botanics with me, which is pretty cool. And of course your classic rose garden. And it would not be a Scottish garden without some sequoia trees. And even in winter, it's got some really nice bones, I have to say. But I did spend a lot of time with botanics. How am I doing on time?
8:20.
8:20. Okay. So I spent a lot of time with the botanics, but my friend Hannah, pictured here, was one of my classmates, and she was the only other horticulturist in our program of 19. Everybody else had come in with a degree in biology or plant science. But she had actually was a trained horticulturist. And here I have to give her a shout out. She was on BBC4 on a garden radio show talking about azalea propagation with one of the greats. But she brought me everywhere. She could drive. So we spent a lot of weekends going and driving. So this was my first experience with the Scottish Rock Garden Society in this little church where their spring bulb show was off in a corner. But everybody was there. The room was electric with the speakers. She was also great to travel with because she had a gluten allergy, so we could always find these great gluten-free places to eat. Her focus of her project was a subsection of rhododendron. Rhododendron is a big genus. There's 2,000 or more species in that group. And she was focusing on just one piece. So she took me to the Species Rhododendron Society meeting on the west coast of Scotland off of Loch Awe. And we show up to this hotel. I go, wow, this is old. And then there are tree-sized rhododendrons, and I start losing my mind. She's like, she has to go to this meeting, and I'm like, I'll be there in a second. I'm just gonna go look at this. And about 30, 40, 2 hours, 20 minutes, I don't know how long I was out there, you would just walk through this is the grounds of this hotel, and you just come upon these big spots of color in the tree, or color in the tree line. And the bark, y'all. This is the bark of a rhododendron. This is purple, lavender, peeling. There is no color editing. I don't edit my photos. And these flowers are this big, and this tree just covered in them. And I'm wondering, I probably look crazy. And it started raining, and I didn't care. And then, of course, the sun came out, and I was born in a while, not so long ago. And I grew up watching The Secret Garden. And it was one of those moments, like in the springtime when the sun comes out and all the bulbs start popping, and the sun comes out and there's this little slit in the garden gate, and I go, oh my gosh, it's like I'm in the movie. And just these incredible color combinations, the snow of rhododendron flowers coupled with this bark, really incredible. And Rhododendron barbatum is still probably my favorite. It's the best red. So I finally end up back in the meeting, and I go, what do I miss? And we come upon this gentleman. It's two gentlemen, probably in their late 80s, who are regaling the group with stories of their time in Turkey back in the 50s, when they decided that they wanted to go to Turkey, and so they went to Turkey and bought a Land Rover and drove around the mountains of Turkey and started collecting plants, and they'd camp out in the middle of nowhere, and the locals would go, who are you? And they kind of wander up and go, what are you doing? And they were just out there. And my favorite line from this guy is, this is how they all stand in their coats, and he goes, it's all very colonial. It was all very colonial. How do you say that? But he took us out to his property, out in the middle of nowhere, Scotland, past the middle of nowhere, Scotland. And he had all of these species rhododendrons just planted all around. And he gave us a tour for the afternoon. And it was just rhododendron after rhododendron after rhododendron, showing us these beautiful flowers. Oh, I got this here. Oh, this has been here this long. And it's amazing to see a group of people lose their mind over one plant. I think it took about 15 minutes for us to get past this plant, just because everybody wanted a picture of it. It's hard to see why not. And even some of the lollygaggers who were dragged there by their significant others, like our friend Matt, could appreciate what they were seeing. And occasionally you would, the rhododendrons just come up in the moss. And so if somebody saw one that they wanted to take, they could go, well, can I have that one? Oh yeah, just pick it up. And by the end, every other person was carrying one or two of these just sprigs of rhododendron they just ripped out of the ground. And the beauty of it is they could go to their house, pick up the moss mat, stick it in, and put the moss back, and it's fine. It took me a while to figure that out, because I grew up in clay, right? But this is another one of my favorites, Rhododendron Thompsonii. And there was a rhododendron for everybody. This one had, the back of the leaf was the same color as Hannah's shirt. It's just nuts. And again, these incredible plant specimens. And just a beautiful drive home. Still snow on the mountains in June. Yeah. I did have a pair of wellies while I was there. And if any of y'all, if y'all go back to Scotland, when y'all go back to Scotland, go to a garden centre. If you go to Edinburgh, there is Dobbies. Go to Dobbies. It is a day. It is shopping mall. It is a tea room. It is a shop. It is a plant nursery. It's everything. And it's an outing. And so every trip to any kind of garden center or garden, we had to stop for tea. We had to stop for tea and cake. But we're sitting there eating our tea and cake, and I'm like, Hannah, look outside. We gotta go outside. Because this was out the tea room window. And so she's like, oh, fine. So what we had gone, this is at Glen Doig, which was founded in 1953 by, oh goodness, Mr. Cox. I call him Mr. Cox because I know Kevin and Peter. But he didn't make it into the army, but instead made friends with a botanist who kept supplying him with these rhododendrons and just fell in love with rhododendrons and is one of the premier rhododendron hybridizers in Scotland. And when we met him, we did meet him while we were walking up the road, and he is probably 87. He's out there in his wellies, and he's crossing blue poppies in his garden so he can make selections. But man, when you're walking through that, that's pretty incredible. Look at that color, y'all. Oh my gosh. Just pretty pictures. And just beds and beds of Meconopsis, and you got your heart-stopping prions there. And blue and purple. Man, when I saw this, there's a lot of that. And Rachel came with us. Rachel is not a plants person. She was a dear friend of mine and Hannah's, and she just went along for the ride, really. And I used her as my yardstick. This is one of the grandest group. This is Cynogrande. The leaves, as you can tell, are that long. And the flower heads are that big on this. And when it does get to full size, it is 20 by 20 feet. So the reason we were here, I was actually helping Hannah with her research by photo documenting it and also helping her press her plants and providing moral support and tea and coffee and chocolate and thanking her for driving me all over creation. And but she was collecting samples so she could take measurements and eventually rewrite the taxonomy of this one group of rhododendron. But she could get pretty excited about them too. Generally, she looks very stoic. And this is what we generally walked around with, this kind of look of about these plants. So I probably shouldn't show you this picture, but as a person who's a garden curator at a facility that is a trial gardening area at Glen Doig, they are developing new rhododendrons. So this is the seed lot for this area, and I was lagging behind. And I saw these. It's really hard not to pull my pruners out and get a picture of this black leaf rhododendron. It could never flower. Look at those. And this photo of this one on the right does not do this justice. This is black and purple on the outer edges. My camera could literally not get the color of this flower. But we spent a lot of time doing that. And I think I'll probably close with this story. So on one of the harebrained adventures that I went with Hannah, she said, meet me in Koror. And if anybody's ever seen train spotting, Koror is the train station that they leave the guys at. It is the most remote place in Scotland. It's 9 miles on either side to any kind of major city or anything. And she's like, this is 9 o'clock at night, and she's like, okay, I'll pick you up there. I didn't know that Koror was out in the middle of nowhere. I just was like, oh yeah, sure, because I was going to go help her collect rhododendrons. And And then the train goes off, and she's not there. And I go, oh dear. And I don't have a smartphone, I don't have anything. And I go, oh crap. So I start walking, and eventually I see her, and we stay in this old hunting lodge. And our friend, oh my goodness, of course I'm going to forget his name. Anyways, he was here to photograph for the Flora of China's rhododendron section. He was working on a grant from the Chinese government. And in the morning we walked out, and this was the view outside. And you know, I'm just never, it's always overwhelming every time you see it, every time you walk out the door in the morning and this is your view. It's really hard not to love it. This will be the last time you see his face. So we climb up, and you can see we've already started finding rhododendron seedlings. Yeah, it's on. So she kind of knows where these rhododendrons are, but we're just climbing up through this forestry project on these hunting lands. And we come to one that she's collecting, and I turn around and I see these leaves, and I go, oh, it's a southern magnolia. No, it's a rhododendron. And it's amazing to see just this diversity all over again. It would be nice to use this as a Magnolia grandiflora alternative, I'm not gonna lie. But I got right back to work, and we got everything processed, and David, I'm so sorry. David has wandered off, and we're like, okay, let's go find David. And this is David. So one of the things that I had kind of laughed at people, because I had been traveling through Scotland, is the midges. The midges were bad. So he had stopped. If you stop, they settle on you. So he had covered every part of his body, waiting for us. We're wandering through this forestry project, and we're seeing these rhododendrons. And like I said, he's working on a grant for the Chinese government. He's trying to catalog all of the species that can be found anywhere in China and the places that China considers part of China. And he's like, oh my gosh, this is one flower that I haven't been able to take a picture of and dissect. What we're not seeing is this is a ledge. And what we're also not seeing is this is a 20-foot tall plant. And so David had jumped down the ledge, had climbed up the rhododendron, was out on a limb, literally out on a limb, trying to get a flower that he could bring back to the garden and dissect. And I just had to get a picture of getting a picture of that. It was just too hilarious. We did end up with some pretty nice specimens. I'm really sorry I did not get to bring mine home with me. They did live at the dorm with me for a while, though. I kept them in the courtyard, and they grew and they were fine. But then I eventually gave them back to Hannah, and she has since told me that they were doing very well in her mother's garden in Yorkshire. But I love the free packing material as well. It's really nice. And after we had worked really hard that day, we were walking around and just taking pictures of these roadsides, and these lupines were coming up. And to watch the sunset over the mountains was pretty incredible. So with that, I will close. I appreciate all of y'all coming and listening to me go on about all these incredible rhododendrons. And oh goodness. Yeah, lots of rhododendrons. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening to me. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I will take any questions that you've got. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Mom.
Why don't the rhododendrons grow here?
So the question was, why don't the rhododendrons grow here? Well, we don't have that thick of a layer of moss. No, the broadleaf evergreen rhododendrons, it's just too hot for them. We do have a couple of species that do kind of grow in this Piedmont region, but I think because of the climate changing and the fact that we've developed a lot of the land, those small microclimates that they exist in, it's kind of hard to get them to survive outside of it. But you know, for those of y'all who do go to the North Carolina mountains in June and July, you know, you get to see these mountainsides covered in our native species of broadleaf evergreens. Pretty incredible. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
When we were in Wales, we saw that they were actually having days where people were grubbing out rhododendrons because they become invasive. Did you encounter that in Scotland?
That is a great point. So yes, there is one species of rhododendron that's potentially a mutant offspring of one species, Rhododendron ponticum. There are hundreds, literal hundreds of species of rhododendron that have been brought out of Asia into the British Isles, but Rhododendron ponticum at some point made a brilliant cross and the offspring took over. And it is a really nasty invasive plant. But they have done the research, and it is a mutant offspring of that one species. They do bring in the National Guard occasionally because it does destroy property, it changes the hydrology, it doesn't allow any native plants to come back, it takes a lot of water out of the soil. It's just a mess. It's nice, but not all that. That's not as nice nearly as what you guys were looking at right there. Yes, ma'am, I saw your hand back there.
I'm just curious if you met any traffic on those one-way roads.
There were occasional moments on those roads where we did find them. It was especially precarious with the buses. So one of the places we did not get to go, because I do go on a bit longer. I probably should just come back and do a second presentation because we didn't even get to the Isle of Mull. So I spent quite a lot of time there over the course of my stay, and it was one of those places where they relied on bus transport. And the bus, most of the lanes on the island were one lane, and this is a full-size city bus. Actually, it was more like a tour bus that they used for the bus system because in the summer times there's tons of people. But seeing them drive around cars and around these turns, they would take these turns at 40, 50 miles an hour, and I'm going, okay, but you learn to trust them. You learn to trust them. You learn to look at the really pretty scenery. That's what you learn to do. Just don't look forward, look to the side. Yes, sir.
When we traveled around in Scotland, we went on the train from town to town.
Mm-hmm.
And we were impressed by the fact that every train station had these model trains with the train cars all being planters.
Yes.
That were full of flowers all the time. It was really enjoyable that way too.
When y'all go back to Scotland, take a train. Take a train anywhere. Doesn't matter where you're going. Stay in Scotland. England's okay. It's brilliant. But take a train. It's a wonderful way to travel. It is a beautiful country, and you get to go away from the roads. You rarely see any roads. You don't have to experience a lot of the kind of this industrial traffic, except for when you go through Glasgow. And it's very quaint. It's so quaint, and not in a demeaning way, but just it's slower, it's more rural, and it's quieter. And people who ride the train outside of Glasgow and Edinburgh, there is actually a cutoff at 9 o'clock. You can't have any booze because it's Scotland. But you get outside in these train stations, and yeah, they have a coalition for the train stations that fund planting those, just so there's some continuity between the train stations.
Yes, I noticed that, yes.
Yeah. Any other fun spots from anybody else's trips?
Did you visit any National Trust gardens that you loved, or any other gardens that was most of your collecting in the wild?
Oh goodness. You know what? I probably did. I'm trying to think. I probably did. When I was going to these gardens, I did actually in Perth. I went to a National Trust garden. I went to a lot of private landowners because when I was collecting with Hannah, she had a lot of ins with the rhododendron species group. So I imagine a lot of those were under the National Trust but still managed by the landowner. But yeah, no, the National Trust of Scotland does an incredible job of just trying to keep up with these properties and make sure that they're supported. I know that they sometimes have some issues, but the fact that that program exists, I think, has really made sure that there's not a lot of turnover and loss within the horticultural fabric of the Isles.
One question.
Yes, sir.
Is there a lot of diversity as you travel the train around Scotland? East to west coast?
Yes.
North, south?
So the question was, is there a lot of diversity as you travel from east to west and around the country? So depending on what kind of diversity that you mean, the weather is completely different from east to west. So on the west side of Scotland, it's very much more like the Pacific Northwest. It is a temperate rainforest, and you've got this kind of green band on the west side. And it's because if you think about it, the Gulf Stream literally kind of dead ends into the west coast of Scotland. So it's always very moist over there, whereas on the east side, it's a bit drier. In fact, Edinburgh is the driest city in Scotland. Driest city in Scotland. And the way that the land is very different. The mountains are different. They're formed from different, by different means, and the coastline is different. Whereas in the west, it kind of goes down. There's lots of cliffs on the east side. So depending on where you go, yeah, you can see a lot of different things. Anything else?
Well, that looks like it.
Thank
Thank you so
guys
much, Amanda.
Much.